Cam froze for a bit, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Okay, now it's back. Um, so it's almost like the conceptual understanding reduced the complexity to a more simple array of sounds. And do you think something like that might have happened to you, that your conceptual understanding somehow made the sensory overload less? That there was this,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. It wasn't so overbearing once I had that understanding.
It's such an interesting example of how our mind influences how we hear and see and what we hear and see,
Yeah,
our
yeah,
conceptual abilities.
yeah. Because now, yeah, you putting it that way, I don't know if that would be considered a technique, but to me, that feels like something that I would apply in daily life. In many of the things that I have been able to learn throughout my life. Um, yeah,
Can you
that
mention a
makes a
few of
lot of
those, Zach?
sense.
Can you mention another example or two, if
Um,
they come to mind?
yeah, I'll try to make it generalized so we don't have to nitpick everything for the
Yeah.
next. Because, like I said, I talk a lot.
No,
um,
bring it on.
uh, my uh, my father was very, very adamant with me that I learn certain skills of trades. Um, and so I know a lot about mechanic work. It's I very rarely need a mechanic. I can do it on my own. But I mean, rebuilding an engine, that's something that takes a lot of, you know, and it would be very overwhelming, especially when you look at diagrams and you see all these little parts and
Hmm,
pieces. And then and I'm also dyslexic,
hmm.
which funny thing that got me kicked out of band because I couldn't read
You were
music.
reading
I
the
was
notes wrong, or
yeah, I was, and I learned everything by ear, which I thought was something that would have impressed someone. But
right.
he brought me after several years. He brought me in the room. And he said, "I was watching your hands, play an F for me," and then I would put my fingers in a way where it would reproduce that sound, but my fingering was wrong. And
Hmm.
he said, "Why is this?" And I said, "I would remember what my fellow flautists were playing. Then I would go home and replay that in my head and move my fingers until I found the notes."
Hmm.
Which, in a way, I thought, "Hey, that's really cool." And he thought, "Well, you've been wasting my time. I'm kicking you out of band." And it really hurt my feelings. But so then you come to doing mechanical work. Okay, well, then if I break it down piece by piece and separate it, then it's no longer an engine. It's, okay, well, it's a carburetor cover.
Hmm.
Okay. And that was just one bolt, and then, okay, you got to adjust, if we're doing a motorcycle, you got to adjust your needles and your floats one
Hmm.
thing at a time in a proper order. And then, before you know it, it just becomes easier,
Yeah.
just like taking the 88 keys and breaking them down like that. So yeah, I actually use that. I apply that type of technique in many
Yeah.
things.
And you know what? It makes total sense to me that it would work in music, but not in Walmart. Because in music, there's an underlying abstract conceptual system that's being manifest physically. The sounds at Walmart are just totally random.
Yeah,
There's no underlying objective given there for your mind to grasp.
right.
So there's no way to assimilate those sounds into something simpler.
Yeah, that's a very excellent point there. Yes, I think you're spot on with that. um because the thing that I guess that makes stuff so the most overwhelming is not having control over a situation.
Mm.
And so, having control over, yeah, I mean, rebuilding an engine is a lot, but if you have your way of doing it and in
Mm.
a controlled setting, then it's not such a thing. And but yeah, the public, that's completely uncontrollable.
Well, and then it certainly helps me understand your interest and motivation as a producer. because you have ultimate control, right? You have the final, you're the person who's taking this array of sounds and structuring it into an artistic whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I produce all of my own stuff. I've produced for others. And I do have, I'm very fortunate to have, there's a fellow musician who I would bet that he falls somewhere on the spectrum. I really would, but I don't think he is, but just what he can do. And we work together a lot, and we co-produce. And he's one of those ones who can just pick up an instrument, any instrument, and play it.
Yeah.
And so we're always bouncing ideas back off, back and forth with
You
each
know,
other. But
and it's funny because I'll just be honest with you and say I know a couple of people closely who have autistic kids. And now that both cases, the fathers, I see personality attributes, which to me seem characteristic of people on the spectrum. But I think it's too glib just to say that and automatically, but I can't help but seeing certain sort of, but they manifest as personality characteristics, but it's like more than that with those folks.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Did you ever, so, well, I want to let's talk about some of the concrete things in terms of, how did you, maybe, can you just tell me a little bit about your music history? Because we left it off. You were in band as an adolescent playing flute, and then, and you're 35 doing music production and with multiple instrumental skills. So can you fill in some of that intervening 15 or 18 years?
Yeah, there's a couple different aspects. What it's done for me socially, as well. That's, but fundamentally, the music, once I started playing, then I could start listening. And very similar to your piano, just breaking it down, and then I heard it more as like a mathematical equation, and so that helped a lot. So once I started playing, it became, for being something that would make me sick, it ended up becoming my thing. I was, it became my obsession. And so and I started writing, and my first love has always been guitar, and so I was always writing songs, and through that I was able to find other people my age who played, and we started a band. And so then that helped in social situations as well. It helped me, I forced myself into a situation where I was forced to get out and do things and participate in life. And so, I mean, music was my lifeline. It really was. And this is off topic a little bit, but I always felt, when I was younger, I would describe to my mother, I'd say, everything hurts. And she would say, what do you mean? And I just say, everything hurts, even the good things. And verbally, back then I was younger. Now that I'm older, I can describe it, and describe what it is. And what it is it's pure overstimulation. Social situations, being touched, medical procedures, especially people that I don't know. And I do have several medical issues that I have to deal with. As a matter of fact, I had a surgery yesterday.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it was okay to be doing this today rather than
fine.
taking time to recover.
Nah, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll show you.
Yeah, sure. Whoa. That's not a minor surgery, Zach.
Uh,
Well, you got to
yeah.
tell me what you have done.
Well,
An appendix or some?
no, I'm terminally ill,
Oh,
and I've been out of the hospital for about a year. But previous to that, I was in the hospital for 5 years. Um, I started feeling ill, started getting sick, and then I ended up having to pretty much put my music career on hold, and which was devastating because of where I was at musically. And I'm getting back there. The last year, I've more so over the last 6 months, I have released a brand new full length album. I've released 4 new singles. Um, I'm back at it and doing what I do. But at 5 years, yeah, I had like some thyroid type issues. I had esophageal varices. I was internally bleeding constantly.
mm,
Uh, Kidney failure, liver failure. My red and white blood cells started fighting each other. It left me anemic, edema. My hair was falling out. All sorts of
mm,
terrible, terrible medical issues. And I held on. I'm just really stubborn, so I I held on for 5 years, and
mm.
had several surgeries. And during that time, I was vomiting blood so violently that I had ripped my stomach muscles and developed a hernia.
Oh, okay.
And it only got worse. And up until yesterday, it had gotten to the size of about a tennis ball. And the skin, it was an umbilical hernia, so it was coming out of my navel.
Right.
And the skin had actually started to split open. And
They had to
I dealt
remove it.
with,
Yeah.
yeah, I dealt with that being split open for several months because I just didn't want to go back to the hospital. It was not a fun experience. And so I put it off, but it wasn't healing. And so I went to my primary care and they looked at it and they said, that should probably come out or else it might get septic. And after everything that we've done to save your life, this can't be the thing.
Right. You don't want to let
So,
this get in the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I went and saw just sometimes the way that things align. This surgeon, I accidentally came across his desk and he's
Mm.
like, Zach, he's still alive. I'll take him. And, we
Ah,
had previous history together. So I went to the city and he's like, all right, let's get that removed.
mm.
And so now I'm left with that. And because of where it's at and how big it was and how they had to put it back together, I will now spend the rest of my life without having a navel.
Ah.
So that's kind of a strange thing. But my whole life has been strange. So it's just
No
another
navel.
talking point.
Well, you got an innie or an outie? No.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm
Well, listen,
trying.
I
I'm
just
trying.
can't believe you're up and around and in such good humor and showing such good energy in our talk. That just
Yeah.
haven't been through that.
It's
That's not a microscopic scar or surgery. That's real major.
yeah, yeah. That's how I've all. My father was like that too.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Well,
he
you
didn't
had you
like.
broke your collarbone and didn't
Yeah,
complain about it for 3 days. You told me.
yeah. It's my father has had. He's passed. He had an extremely high pain threshold,
Hmm.
and so do I. And anytime that either one of us have ever had a medical issue, we've never really gotten upset or worried about it. And a lot of times, if it was something that we could do at home, we did, which doctors don't
Hmm.
recommend. And I'm not recommending to anybody. But there's been several times that I have been cut and I have either cauterized the wound myself, sewed it back up, or glued it shut.
Hmm.
My father and I have both pulled our own teeth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
It
just,
bothers you, you
I'm
pull
not
it out.
reacting because I'm squeamish about that
Yeah.
stuff.
It's,
So, in a way,
yeah.
I'm in awe, but I'm also a little bit squeamish.
Yeah, so having a high pain threshold it's a blessing and
Yeah.
a curse.
Well, all these physical, medical, existential challenges must have had some impact on your on music and what you do and how you create or how you write.
It did. It did in more ways than I realized while I was going through it. Um, After that 5 years, that what they ended up doing is they ended up putting some shunts
Mm-hmm.
in me,
To
Uh,
bypass, to be able to access things
yeah,
easily.
to access and to bypass a lot
Bypass,
of
yeah.
things in those esophageal varices. I think I must have had probably between 15 and 17 procedures where they had to go in and band and cauterize them.
Mm.
And when it came to the last one, I vomited. Uh, it was about a gallon and a half of blood in under an hour. I'd lost so much blood that I was losing my eyesight. Um, and what had happened is all the varices that they had fixed, there was nowhere else for this backup blood to go, and it ended up ripping in my stomach. And
Mm.
they said, you know, we have this procedure. It's very dangerous, and you've been dealing with this for 5 years, but we were always avoiding this because it has a very, very low mortality rate. But
Mm.
here's what you're looking at. If we don't do it, 100% chance you're gone in a couple days. So it's
Kind
up
of a
to you.
no-brainer there.
Yeah. And I said, well, okay, I'll take my chances. And here I am. So,
Mm.
you know, that ended well. But yeah, while that was all going on, um, I did not once pick up a guitar, write a song or anything. I didn't understand I didn't really feel the mental impacts of it until afterwards. And when I got out, I went into a very, very deep, uh,
I'm sorry, let me turn this phone off.
okay.
I just don't want it to keep ringing. Okay, it's off. Okay,
I'd
turn it
gone
off.
into I got into like a very deep state of depression, like suicidal depression. It was bad. Because I had survived all of that. But I realized that 5 years of that and not playing, I didn't know if I could ever play music again. It's like that, the special place inside of me that music comes from. Because that's another thing. Music takes me to a place where existing actually doesn't hurt.
Mm.
As to where I said earlier, everything hurts all the time, even the good stuff.
Right.
Wherever I go in my brain, and I don't know if you've listened to my music or not.
No, not yet.
Okay, it's lyrically incredibly dark, but for me, it's therapeutic. Um, and it's the only place that I can go to where I am not really affected by autism. It's just strange because it's where it comes from. You know, well, maybe, I mean, not where it comes from, but you know, it's just that music was such a painful thing for me because of it, and now it's a place that I go to where it's like my brain and my body have a vacation.
Hmm.
You know, and I couldn't. I had thought my career was over, and music, the love of my life, I thought it was over, and I had gotten, from all those years in the hospital bed, I gotten fibromyalgia and
Mm.
joint issues, and so I couldn't really play one song without having pain,
Mm.
and so I went through this really, really, really dark. And then I don't know. I woke up one day and I asked myself, "Are you really done with telling your story?" No, I'm not. So I locked myself in my studio, and 2 months later, released a brand new album called Cheerophobia, which I thought was very appropriate.
Yeah.
Um, not only from the hospital stuff, but because of the way that being on the spectrum. That's when I date, I have to explain, hey, you're dating someone on the spectrum. And
Yeah.
the first love of my life, we met when we were 17. We were together for 7 years, and
It's rare for those early relationships to last that long. I mean, just speaking from my own experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and then especially being on the spectrum, we are. I'll be the first to admit we can be difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but the more that we learn about ourselves and understand, etiquette and things like that, it makes it easier.
It's so paradoxical the way you describe your part of your story, that the the thing that caused pain was the path to being free of pain.
Yeah. Yeah, but that sums it up perfectly. Yeah, I mean, it really does.
Yeah,
Um,
almost like you had to feel, I'm thinking of like, the hero's journey, all this suffering to be released. You have to suffer to be released from suffering or
yeah,
something like that. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not sure. It's only a half-formed thought, but there's something like that in your myth, in your story.
yeah, yeah. There is. There, yeah, it really is. That's just facing everything head on and
Yeah.
just breaking down those barriers, those walls. Very painful, but
So
so worth it.
we've met at a really unusual, pivotal time in your life. You discovered music. It was a big part. You had a really rough 5-year period. And do you feel like you're emerging from that really tough part of your life into something? I mean, you said to me you're terminally ill, but you also seem embracing of the future to me.
Yeah, I am. I'm. It's I I spent most of my life being very depressed and
Spend most
dealing
of your
with
life what? I'm
the
sorry.
mental side, being depressed,
Depressed. Okay.
clinically. I mean, yeah, and I had a lot of amazing opportunities. I've done a lot of amazing things with my life, um, but there's always been that depression. And after I got out of the hospital and after I went through that terrible 2 months of just wondering why I was still here and all that, and then all of a sudden the purpose came back, and it's even though I deal with terminal illness, and I don't know how long I'm going to be around, or what I'm going to do. It's the happiest time I've ever been in my entire life.
Hmm. How do you
So
explain that?
yeah, I don't
How
know,
do you?
but
Yeah.
it definitely I had a lot of time to think in that hospital bed, and a lot of time to process, and a lot of time to learn how to overcome several more issues. 'Cause I'd overcome a lot, but through those experiences, I overcame so much more, and I just feel like a stronger person. I feel more mentally secure, more well-rounded.
Right.
I definitely feel more empathetic to other people, which
Mm.
is a trait that I like about myself. You know,
Yeah.
people on the spectrum have a tendency to not understand those things. Um,
I know that's said a lot and I've read that a lot, but I have to tell you, these 23 interviews I've done, I've met some of the most supportive, understanding, generous human beings I've ever met in my life, to be honest.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, I mean,
that's that's true, and I mean a lot of them do. They can be empathetic to situation them
yeah,
us. We can be empathetic, but it's from a different, at least for me anyway. So I
yeah,
can't speak for everyone, but it's not like a neurotypical empathy. It's more of like I can scientifically or mathematically understand what you're going through. It's more like that.
hmm
And I personally, I have friends that just they cannot, they can understand, and but they can't really truly feel. It's
hmm
empathy, just in a different way.
right, right,
um and of course everyone on the spectrum, it's such a broad spectrum that affects
yeah,
people differently in so many ways. um but I think that a lot of the ones who can uh be very empathetic and be very understanding, I think that has a lot to do with the way that they were raised,
oh, the family
the family
environment
dynamic.
they were in. Yeah,
hmm because I've known some that were raised in just a family situation, that was just of lower consciousness, just because
yeah,
it's just how it is. And
yeah,
especially where locations, I've lived all over the country, and depending on even economic locations,
hmm
people who suffer economically, that affects the home.
sure,
And so I'll find a lot to where, they'll be talking to somebody on the spectrum, and well, someone's talking about what they've been through, and they're like, oh yeah, it's just like, my life sucks too. I'm like, you're
Yeah.
not, you're not really
That really,
hearing, yeah,
yeah.
okay, yeah, you wrecked your truck, or you got to find a new place to live. That's when was the last time the doctor said you're not going to live 24 hours?
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean,
I mean, let's put things in perspective here.
perspective, exactly.
Yeah. Um,
That's
well, it sounds to me like, well, let me ask you actually, all these challenges that you've been encountering, and now you're coming out, I don't want to say the other side, but you've come through with it sounds like a deeper appreciation of of life in the moment, to the point where you're, like you said, you were clinically depressed, but now you feel you're embracing life in a more positive way. Has it been um, these things that you've encountered medically that have brought you to another place? And I mean, seeing yourself overcome them, or just, hey, knowing how fragile life is, it just makes you appreciate each day more.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, you know it's very similar to like the explaining, working on an engine. The more stuff that I have to endure, it gives me more opportunity to break things apart and analyze them. And the more I analyze things, the more I can develop coping skills.
Mm.
And like what I was saying is, my first relationship, we were together for 7 years. I had told her, please do not ever do like a surprise party, never, with me. And she's like, even if it's a small group of people, your friends, the ones that you see every day,
Mm.
the ones who know you intimately in so many ways. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah, anybody. It's not even you by yourself,
Yeah.
please, because it'll catch me off guard. And then I'll just immediately go, into what could potentially be a meltdown.
Yeah.
And well, one year she did. I felt so bad. I felt so bad. I mean,
Oh,
but it was a learning experience. It really was. She was so sweet, and for
yeah.
trying and to be with someone like me on the spectrum, and especially at that time, not being diagnosed, and
Right.
not having done research. I mean, I look back and just think, wow, she was a trooper. She was
Yeah.
amazing. But that one time there was a birthday party, surprise party, and I walk in, and my friends had those little streamer poppers,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm all of a sudden I just open the door and I'm being like yelled at and have these things
Yeah.
popping in my face, and
Yeah.
I froze, and I looked, and I backed up, and I walked to my car, and I got in and I drove off, and I had to drive around town for about 45 minutes to an hour to process what was going on.
Yeah.
And while I processed it, I looked at how wrong that was of me to do that,
Mm.
and that she did it from a place of caring. And I had to remind myself that these are people who love me and people that I love. And then I was able to go back and open the door and say, sorry, everyone.
Mm.
This is what happened. I processed it. Now let's
It's And
continue.
they hung
And
in there. They were still there.
yeah, they were.
Yeah.
They were.
Those are
Another,
real friends, I'll tell you.
yeah, another fortunate thing about that town that I
Yeah.
grew up in, being so tight knit.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah,
yeah. Sorry.
experiences like that have helped me grow. And so now I have so much of an appreciation when I'm in any type of relationship and someone does something they go out of their way for me. I I I know how to cope with that so I don't have a meltdown. And then maybe later I might have to go off and spend some time by myself, but I do it a lot more quietly.
Mhm.
And I really definitely don't just get upset and throw them under the bus. And so everything that I've had in my life has opened up a door to the next door of growth.
Right. Right.
So yeah, the hospital changed so much about my view on life and health,
Mm.
and nothing is guaranteed. And I mean, it was a very big learning experience.
Right.
And so I was already in the habit of learning as much as I could from every situation. So I learned a lot.
You learned a lot.
Yeah.
You mentioned, oh, it's frozen again. I know. Sorry, my cam seems to freeze about once every 45 minutes. Um, you mentioned that you had just completed work on an album. I just want to, before we wrap up, bring us up to today, what you're working on, what's going on for you musically in the present.
Yeah, well, I'll keep it brief, but I started getting into music. It became my obsession. I had a knack for it. And my band and I, we got regional exposure and then national and international. And I ended up being sought out by a producer, very well known producer. And if people want to do their research, all they got to do is put my name into Google and they'll see everything that I've done and who I've worked with.
Right.
But he wanted me to go solo. And I was
Really?
already the primary songwriter. Yeah, because we were, my first band, we were progressive rock. And he envisioned more of, something that was a little more mainstream.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I listened, because I did, when I went solo, we cut, I co-engineered and produced, and that's how I started getting into the production side of things.
When you say solo, do you mean with just using a group of studio musicians rather than your own band, or do you mean solo, you played everything?
I played a lot of stuff, but yeah, it was the engineer that I work with today that I was talking about. He was there from the beginning, and he's the one who, I am not a percussionist. He can play drums.
Okay.
But we know each other so well that he kind of knows. Like, I don't even have to tell him. I'm like, I'm hearing a sound that's kind of like, and they'll go this, and I'll be like, exactly. So that's,
Yeah.
So we work very well together.
Nice relationship to have.
Yeah. So he's my, other half when it comes to to writing music, the instrumentation of music anyway. But yeah, it was just my band. We were all in our early 20s, and everything just kind of fell. This kind of off subject, but I said, because at first when I was offered the deal, I said, I'm not going to leave my boys. I'm not going to leave my band. They have to come with. And so I worked out a deal with the producer and the studio, and they said, okay, but they're going to play what we tell them to play. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. We want to change directions and go mainstream. And so I'd had the meetings, and then I came back and got the band together, and I said, hey guys, I have really good news. We've gotten signed. And my guitarist said, I have some good news too. Me and my girlfriend are pregnant. How are we going to work that out? And he's like, so cool. I'm going to go handle this. And then another one said, yeah, I took some time off. I'm going to college. And so I have some news too. I'm going to college. So anyway,
band got signed and there was no more band.
Right. And it ended up working out very well. It was much easier to focus on what I was trying to portray.
Sure.
And from that album, I received 5 Grammy nominations.
Wow. What category were you in?
It was in 2010. I got Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Album of the Year, Best New Artist, and Best Male Vocal in the pop category.
That's fantastic, Zach.
Yeah. And and then my career just started snowballing from there. And I dropped out of high school. I got my GED.
Right.
I did not go to my high school graduation because it would be too overwhelming, because I'd have to speak. And my graduating class was 19 people. And these are people that I went through preschool with.
Right. So
we all knew each other.
School life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I still couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And now, if I could have gotten up on stage and accepted my diploma and talked about myself, if I would have just played music or had a guitar in my hand, I could have done it.
Yeah.
Because that just seems to change everything.
It's funny. I just about a year ago. I don't know if you know the bass player Victor Wooten.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was giving a commencement speech, but he had his bass and he was talking and then he was playing a little bit and then he'd talk a little more, and it was like the talking and the playing were completely integrated. And when you said that, I was picturing
Yeah.
you up there, right?
Yeah.
It's a great thing to see, but maybe I'll send you YouTube link if you're
That'd be
curious.
great.
Or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because
I mean,
I'm
I
I'm a
love
big
him.
fan of his. Yeah.
Me too. I love his playing. I love him as a human being. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
He's really cool. Really cool. Very interesting dude.
yeah,
Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to be around him a couple times.
yeah.
That's
Well, I mean, your musical achievements are so admirable. I mean, considering where you started, it's almost like your story is crying out to be told in a broader form, in a more general form. I mean, because it's an incredible story of just strength, courage, staying with it.
that's one of the reasons that I yeah, and actually it's the using the guitar as a diversion technique. That is why you know, my everything that I've earned has become depleted now because of 5 years in the hospital.
Sure.
But you know, I one of the things that got to me the most when I got out of the hospital is I thought no one is going to remember who I am. My career is over. I disappeared for 5 years.
Right.
I don't have a fan base anymore. I don't,
Mm.
you know, and so I felt completely lost and completely broken. And I had noticed that over those 5 years, you know, because my music is in some movies and other things like that. I earn royalties.
Hmm.
Well, by the time that I started getting sick, even prior to the 5 years that I spent in the hospital, I started getting sicker, and I wasn't realizing what was going on. I was just pushing through it.
Right.
And then I ended up having a minor stroke,
Mm.
you know, while performing. And then I ended up having a massive seizure. And so all this stuff started happening. But, you know, I was looking I was basically learning from my royalty statements, but people were downloading music then. And
Yeah. You were
I,
losing, right. You were
yeah,
losing
yeah.
sales and income, of course.
Yeah, but not only that, it's you know, I'd see my royalty statements and I could say, okay, I was smart enough to. I always do my research. I made sure that when I signed to the labels that I work with, I hold my master rights
Mm.
because a label wants to own that, and so you only make a
Oh, yeah,
fraction,
of course.
you
Yeah.
know. And so I went from what would potentially have been like 13% of my income, I was earning like 90% of my
Mm.
income
Yeah.
because I had control.
Right.
And so by the time I got out of the hospital, I noticed I'm really not making any money. What is this? And I got a royalty statement from BMI. I go through BMI. And I noticed how many times my stuff has been played. And I'm like,
Right.
there should be money there because there's a lot.
Hmm.
Maybe people haven't forgotten, you know, maybe I still have some relevance. And then when I looked at it and everything turned to streaming, as to where I would used to make like 90 cents and a song download, you know, $10 an album download.
Mm.
Um, in streaming, and this is completely off subject and, you know, topic
Yeah.
for another day, but royalties end up getting cut down to
Yeah.
per stream, which is
Fractions of a penny. Yeah.
yes,
It's
0.03
ridiculous.
cent.
Yeah.
And
I know
and
that.
so I ended up, I don't care. You know, I mean, the money is nice. I like to be able to support, you know, a way of life, keep a roof over my head. But what really sparked it was noticing that my listeners had actually increased and not decreased. And once I saw that, I said, I'm picking it back up.
Yeah.
And
There's people
so,
who want to hear what you're doing.
yeah, so
Yeah.
you know, I released the new album
Yeah.
and the singles and a lot of new listeners, a
Yeah.
lot of new demographic age, you know, and it's
Yeah.
just it keeps me going and you know,
Well,
fuels me.
Zach, I'm certainly gonna, look you up. I when I do these interviews, I kind of just want to meet people as people and let them tell me their stories and not come into it with any preconceptions. So I don't typically, do any background on someone before we talk. But we've got to wrap things up. I feel like we
Okay.
could talk for days. but
Yeah. Yeah, it was
I
good.
only I allotted 90 minutes, and I've
Gotcha.
got somebody
Gotcha.
waiting for me 15 minutes just because
Oh,
you have so much to say here, so much to the topic. Um, uh, and I just want to say, as I mentioned, I've met some really beautiful, honest, courageous, strong people doing this project, and you're one of them. And I'm just so
thank you.
grateful for
Thank you.
your time and the candor. I mean, the things you shared. You know, I talked to somebody yesterday, a woman, and her house burned down a week ago. She lost all her possessions. She did a musical act with her husband. They lost all their props, scores, everything. And she still wanted to go ahead with the interview. I mean, my heart was just like overwhelmed. But when people hear about this project, it seems to really touch something. So I guess the only
It
other
does with
thing,
me, and
yeah,
that's if I could just one more
sure.
thing. Like I say, I have a lot of short points that I take the long way too, but the mental and medical application, that is something that I'm very adamant about.
Hey, do you
And
want
with the
to?
therapy,
We could talk again if you want, rather than have to squeeze something in at the end. I mean, if you feel like there are, even if it was just 15 minutes or a half hour, I don't want to cut you short, but
sure,
I do have to stop.
sure,
You,
because I meant to keep it more on that
yeah.
aspect
And so
because
there are
it's
things we
very
didn't get
important
to.
to me.
Okay.
Yes. All right,
So
so we'll
let's
do a
do
part two.
this. We'll do part two.